I am grateful for an opportunity to spend a special evening. It is a room, as I sat and listened and had an opportunity to renew old acquaintances and make new friends. It is a room full of warmth, of friendship, of love, but of purpose. And I want to thank this institution for what you have done for this country and the world the last 100 years. It is a unique, special, courageous institution in a world that not often is it's about courage, and it's about character, as each individual's life is guided by those two indispensable elements, character and courage. And so I thank you for what you are doing, what you've done, and what you will continue to do. And thank you for also honoring my friend and my predecessor, Leon Panetta. I told Leon that I would be up on the stage soon, showering him with praise and glory. It's just a regular Thursday night occurrence for Panetta. Just another Thursday night, he gets another award and another recognition. But in Panetta's case, it's well-deserved. It is well-deserved. That career that he has built and the service he has provided for our country is among the most unique and distinguished careers of modern public servants, and I really mean that. Now, I want to share with you, and I promise Leon and Jane Harman and other members, former members of Congress, that it is brief. I know for a former senator, you hear that all the time. And I recognize I still have some bad habits that I picked up during those days, but this will be some comments I want to share with all of you that I spent some time on. Not that anything I'm about to say is profound. I'm incapable of that. But nonetheless, I try. But these are comments I do feel, and I strongly believe. And as I begin my comments that I want to share with you tonight, I want to acknowledge so many special people in the room. I know we won't be able to get to everyone tonight, but one in particular who taught me about the ADL, what it was doing, why it was important, and that's Bob Wolfson. I think most of you know Bob directed the ADL office in Omaha for a number of years, and when I ran for the United States Senate, I began my campaign in 1995 in Nebraska. No one knew me. Bob was one of the first to come to see me, to take a measure of me. Is this a serious fellow? What does he believe? What's he about? On more than one occasion, I was a guest in his home as he would gather different people, and I would try to convince him that I was the right person to support for the United States Senate. But I would never forget the hours I spent with Bob and his generosity and thoughtfulness and his tutoring this fellow who wanted to be a United States Senator who didn't really understand so much of the things that you have done over the years and why you're so important. So to Bob tonight, thank you, my friend. I am grateful. As I have noted, your selection of Leon Panetta is, I think, very appropriate for 100 years as you celebrate what you've done. And I can't think of a more appropriate public servant. Throughout his career, he's embodied the ADL's fight, continued fight, for justice, equality, and security. And the ADL has been about that. Your theme tonight for your 100th anniversary, imagine a world without hate, That theme captures the hope and the possibilities of mankind. That hope and that sense of possibility is overflowing in this room tonight. You know that. But you also understand the realities that will always temper a certain amount of hope. But if we don't have hope, there's not much left. And there is no goal more worthy or more noble than world peace, which you do and you're about. A world of respect and dignity for all people, all mankind, as noted on this stage by other speakers tonight. And although that may seem impossible, we must never, ever quit trying. No organization has done more in pursuing this dream than the ADL. It is who you are, it's your very fiber. Year after year, decade after decade, you have fought against intolerance, prejudice, and injustice all over the world, including in America's armed forces. The Department of Defense is proud, very proud, to have worked with the ADL to make our military more open, more equal, and more just. One example of this historic partnership is at the Air Force Academy, where only a few years ago there were troubling accusations of religious intolerance and anti-Semitism. That began to change when the local ADL worked with leaders at the Academy to create a special course on respect for religious freedom, which is now required for all cadets. Going forward, we will continue to build on this relationship. We'll build on the relationship because there is so much more we have to learn from each other. Both of our institutions are committed to strong national security, and both are committed to combating hatred and bigotry. The ADL has never separated the two, for they are interconnected. You've shown that the strength of civil rights underpins strong national security. This balance has been the essence of Leon Panetta's career. As strong as Leon Panetta is on security, he's always been just as strong on civil rights and equality. As the director of the U.S. Office for Civil Rights, one of his first jobs in government, he pushed for equal education across the South. As a leading member of Congress, chairman of the Budget Committee, and White House Chief of Staff, he worked to advance civil rights everywhere. And as Secretary of Defense, he oversaw the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and opened combat positions for women. The balance between security and civil rights sends an important message to the world. And Leon Panetta has lived that message. And at the Department of Defense, we work to preserve America's individual liberties as well as defend our national freedom. When the Supreme Court issued its decision on the Defense of Marriage Act this summer, the Department of Defense immediately began working on providing same benefits to all eligible spouses regardless of sexual orientation. We did it because everyone who serves our country in uniform, everyone in this country, should receive all the benefits they deserve and they've earned, and in accordance with the law. Everyone's rights must be protected. This means that all spouses of service members are entitled to DoD ID cards and the benefits that come with them. But several states today are refusing to issue these ID cards to same-sex spouses at National Guard facilities. Not only does this violate the state's obligations under federal law, but their actions have created hardship and inequality by forcing couples to travel long distances to federal military bases to obtain the ID cards they're entitled to. This is wrong. It causes division among our ranks, and it furthers prejudice, which DoD has fought to extinguish, as has the ADL. Today, I directed the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Frank Grass, to take immediate action to remedy this situation. At my direction, he will meet with the adjutants general from the states where these ID cards are being declined and denied. The adjutants general will be expected to comply with both lawful direction and DoD policy, in line with the practices of 45 other states and jurisdictions. Whether they are responding to natural disasters here at home, in their states, or fighting in Afghanistan, our National Guardsmen all wear the uniform of the United States of America. They are serving this country. They and their families are entitled to all the benefits and respect accorded to all of our military men and women. Our people are the foundation of a ready and capable force, and that will always be. Leon Panetta knows this very, very well. He knows it as well as anyone in this room, that the core responsibility of any job, of authority or accountability, is people. This business is about people. Hope, possibilities, peace is about people. The ADL is about people. The United States military is deeply respected by the American people because of the character, the determination, resilience, and courage of our men and women in uniform. These men and women in uniform, as we know, have borne a heavy and constant burden since 9/11, along with their families. And their families often get forgotten in this business. Families should never be forgotten. They are the anchor. They're the substance. They are the soul. They're the core of who each of us are and what we each represent. Yet, as we wind down the second of two of America's longest wars, we continue to face a complicated and volatile and dangerous world. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the Middle East, where the United States and our allies are facing an unprecedented set of complex challenges. For Israel, this shifting landscape has brought new threats and new dynamics. Even as Israel takes important steps toward peace and the two-state solution, these challenges remain on its borders. There are no margins for Israel. Egypt's future remains uncertain. There is a humanitarian crisis in Syria, along with disease and hunger compounding the scourge of sectarian violence and civil war. These challenges demand unprecedented cooperation between the United States and Israel. Israel's self-defense capabilities and its qualitative military edge are central to both Israel and U.S. security interests. The United States has provided important support for Israel's Iron Dome system, which has proven very successful in protecting Israeli citizens. And earlier this year, the United States reached a historic agreement, an agreement to open up even more advanced military capabilities to Israel. One of these capabilities is the V-22 Osprey, a tilt-rotor aircraft that will greatly enhance the range and effectiveness of Israeli special forces. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that we are working with the Israeli government to provide them with 6 new V-22s. I have directed the Marine Corps to make sure that this order is expedited. That means Israel will get 6 V-22s out of the next order to go on the assembly line, and they will be compatible with other IDF capabilities. The Israeli and American defense relationship is stronger than ever. That isn't due just to where I am at my time. That's due to previous secretaries of defense, Panetta, Gates, all of the previous secretaries. This organization, the American people, our Congress, past presidents, we've all worked together to strengthen this relationship. Another area of our common security interests is preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. The United States is presently testing Iranian intentions for a diplomatic solution. As we engage Iran along with our partners, we are very clear-eyed about the reality in the Middle East. Iran is a state sponsor of terror, responsible for spreading hatred and extremism throughout the region. But foreign policy is not a zero-sum game. If we can find ways to resolve disputes peacefully, we are wise to explore them. Engagement is not appeasement, nor is it containment. We know what those are. We know where they lead, and we will not pursue them. And President Obama has repeatedly made clear that words are not enough. Action must match words. We understand why this is so important to so many people, because we've all been to Yad Vashem. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to revisit Yad Vashem. I'd been there before, but this time was special for me because I brought my son, Ziller, with me. I wanted him to see the harsh realities of the depths of evil and the beautiful tribute to the victims of the past. Yad Vashem is an instruction for future generations, like all great memorials. A warning to never, ever again stand idly by in the face of hatred and bigotry. We know that ridding our world of hatred takes more than just work, imagination, and songs. It will always demand commitment, sacrifice, and courage. It demands that we must continue to march our armies of tolerance, equality, and justice around the globe. And it demands that we remember the timeless questions of Rabbi Hillel. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? As Panetta often says, our future is not guaranteed. You've got work to do. You've got to work for your future and your freedoms, and you have to fight for it. With the continued help and leadership of the ADL, the people in this room, all across the world, I know our country always will. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
For his leadership and commitment to protecting America's security and preserving America's highest ideals, we are pleased and proud to present the 2013 Centennial Year William and Naomi Gorwitz Institute Service Award to Leon Panetta.
I can't tell you how much I deeply appreciate your honoring me. I want to thank Alan Gary for creating this award in honor of his parents. And I'd also like to thank my buddy Abe Foxman and Stacy Burdett and the staff of ADL. Abe, you have done so much for our country and for our world, to teach us to live in a world without bigotry and without hatred. In my book, you are a national treasure, you are an American patriot, and I am honored to be here with you tonight. I'm also honored to be back in New York City. This has a lot of special meaning for me. My parents, obviously as immigrants, came through this town, and my grandfather as well came here, actually bought some property in Brooklyn. I don't know what the hell ever happened to that. I came up after leaving the Office for Civil Rights and served as an assistant to the mayor of New York City at the time, John Lindsay. So I spent some time working in this city and getting to know it. Worked very closely with the delegation, the congressional delegation, both on the Senate side as well as on the House side. And I also, when I got out of Congress, served on the board of the New York Stock Exchange. So I've had an awful lot of relationships and roots in this city. I'm also honored to be here with my successor at the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel. He's a good friend and somebody who, I think really has greatly served this country. Chuck, I just want you to know that one thing I've always been proud of is having a good sense of timing when to get the hell out of Washington. I have never in 50 years of public service seen so many people dedicated to screwing things up. Every time I look at what's happening there, I keep thinking of a story that a good friend in the Congress once told, a representative from Massachusetts by the name of Silvio Conti. We were doing a budget summit, one of the first budget summits. It was during the Reagan administration. Democrats, Republicans sitting in a room trying to work out an agreement on the budget. And it was tough. All of the tough issues that we talk about these days were on the table: entitlements, discretionary spending, taxes. And it was not easy, but we stayed there. In those days, the leadership said we had to stay in the room and not leave until we got a deal. So we kept working at it, and every time we were close to a deal, somebody would get up and walk out in disgust. And finally, Silvio said, I'm a little sick and tired of this. He says, this reminds me of the story of the three missionaries, the British, the French, and the Italian missionaries, who were in a very uncivilized part of the world. And they were making their way down this uncivilized river in their little boat, and the boat tipped over, and they managed to make it to shore, only to fall into the hands of a cannibal tribe. And the chief said to them, look, you have a choice. You can either take your own lives or jump in this pot of boiling water. Either way, we're going to use your skins for our canoes. Well, the British missionary, on hearing that, took out his knife and plunged it in his heart and said, God save the Queen. The French missionary took out his knife, slit his wrist, and said, Vive la France. The Italian took out his stiletto and started punching himself in the stomach and chest area, and the chief said, what are you doing? He says, I'm trying to screw up your canoe. There are a lot of people trying to screw up the canoe right now in Washington. And, I know, Chuck, that trying to work and keep the Defense Department focused and dealing with 3 million Americans who serve courageously in that department, I know they count on your leadership, and you really are doing an outstanding job under very difficult circumstances. 100 years that you're recognized today. I am also honored by the whole fundamental purpose of the Anti-Defamation League, which is to fight discrimination and hatred and fight for equality and equal justice. This country was founded on those principles. The ADL fights for the very purpose of our democracy, and that makes all of you great American patriots. I think I first learned about the ADL when I was in Congress and had the opportunity to be able to learn about it. I stayed with several members of Congress, those of us who came back to Washington and did not have our families accompany us. We stayed together, and it was, I think it's fair to say, it was Animal House on Capitol Hill. One of those members was Chuck Schumer, who's someone that obviously you all know and who has a tremendous passion for Israel that is deep and infectious and has a great passion for a lot of things. We slept in the bottom of the house in the living room area. He slept on a couch, and I slept in a made-up bed. And every night before we went to sleep, I tried to get him to say a Hail Mary, and he made me say the Shema. We tried to cover all the bases, and we did. And I learned a lot from him. Learned a lot about what the ADL was all about and what it did. And the reason I guess I particularly appreciate the work that you do is because I am the son of immigrants. Most of you are the sons and daughters, or grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants. That's a story I know well. My parents came to this country in the early 1930s, and like millions of other immigrants, had very little money, knew very little English, few skills. They came through Ellis Island and managed ultimately to make their way to my hometown of Monterey. I used to ask my father, why did he travel all of that distance? Leaving, obviously there was poverty in the area of Italy that they lived in, but they had the comfort of family. Why would you leave all of that to come to a strange land? And my father said to me, it was because your mother and I believed we could give our children a better life. And that is the American dream. That's what we want for our children, and hopefully our children will want for theirs. But dreams are just dreams. As my father used to say, dreams are just dreams. Unless you're willing to work for it, unless you're willing to sacrifice, unless you're willing to take risks, unless you're willing to fight for what you believe in. Those are the values that my parents had and the values they passed on to me. They were tough. People that, had to make their way in a strange society, but they knew that there was opportunity here. My dad started a restaurant in downtown Monterey during the war years. Tough time. And my earliest recollections were washing glasses in that restaurant because my parents believed that child labor was a requirement. He then, after the war, sold the restaurant and moved out, bought a farm in Carmel Valley, where we actually continue to reside now. Planted a walnut orchard, and he used to go around with a pole and hook, and my brother and I used to be underneath collecting the walnuts. When I got elected to Congress, my father said I'd been well trained to go to Washington because I'd been dodging nuts all my life. The values of my parents, those values of hard work and sacrifice and commitment and dedication and fighting for what you want to achieve, those are the values, frankly, that made America great. And it is those who are willing to respond to the trumpet, to the call to service, that helps preserve our democracy for the future. This dinner, in many ways, honors people who have answered the basic call to public service. You've been asked to serve your community with your philanthropy and, more importantly, with your time, with your commitment, and with your energy. Tonight, as I accept this award, I would like to share it with all of those that have served with me in my different capacities, because it is their service and their commitment that made whatever I was able to achieve happen. My own personal commitment to public service was from my parents, who said I and my brother owed something back to this country for what this country had given them. 2 years in the Army, learning about what it meant to work together for a common mission, learning what it meant to be willing to sacrifice in order to accomplish a difficult mission. And a young president who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for this country. That's what inspired me to get involved in public service. And that was the reason I went back to Washington as a young legislative assistant. And ultimately, the reason I headed up the U.S. Office for Civil Rights, and it was tough. Desegregating schools in the South during that time was not easy. But the people in the Office for Civil Rights were dedicated to accomplishing the task of giving kids an equal education. At the time, President Nixon, as you know, pursued the Southern strategy and made a deal with Strom Thurmond that they were going to back off of strong civil rights enforcement. And I had to make a basic decision at that time. Do I uphold the law and back off of my principles? Do I fight for what I believe in, or do I sacrifice my job? I lost my job, but I have never regretted the decision of standing for what you believe in. Went back to Monterey, and public service was still in my veins, ran for Congress, served 8 terms in the Congress, and I have to say that it was a different Congress. Speaker Tip O'Neill, Bob Michael, people that we just honored the other day, Tom Foley, who was a speaker and majority leader. Republicans and Democrats worked together. They worked together to try to solve the problems facing this country. Yes, they had their differences. Yes, they had their politics. But when it came to issues affecting this country, they worked together for the common good. And that's the way our democracy should work. President Clinton asked me then to take over the Office of Management and Budget. And the good people there helped work with me and the President to develop the Clinton Economic Plan. And as a result of that, and as a result of the work that was done on budget summits and budget agreements, we ultimately balanced the federal budget. Remember that? We balanced the federal budget. And it was done because people were willing to work together to be able to accomplish that. When I returned to Monterey after that service, my wife and I started the Panetta Institute because we wanted to inspire young people to get into public life and public service. That's the heart and soul of our democracy. And in 2009, the trumpet sounded again for me, and President Obama asked if I would consider running the CIA. I have to be honest with you, I was reluctant at first. But then I looked at the challenges that were facing this nation. 2 wars, the war on terrorism after 9/11, Al-Qaeda's leadership in hiding in Pakistan and continuing to spread their influence and their effort to try to attack this country, Iran, North Korea, their nuclear programs were moving forward. And so again, I came back to federal service and returned to Washington. At the CIA, I had really 2 major objectives. One was to restore the credibility of that agency that had been badly damaged, and that's what the President asked me to do. Second was to disrupt, dismantle, and ultimately defeat the terrorists who attacked this country on 9/11. CIA is made up of professionals. They aren't Republican, they aren't Democrats, they aren't political. They are good public servants, good Americans, who come to work every day looking to do what's best for this country, to keep America safe, to keep America safe. That is the key to what the CIA and the intelligence agencies are all about. The President also asked that I go after bin Laden. And at that time, the trail was pretty cold. We had a team at Langley that was responsible for the mission. I asked for weekly updates. In the fall of 2009, we learned how difficult it would be in the struggle to try to find bin Laden and his leadership. We had a lead on number 2, Zawahiri. We had an asset that we were going to meet at a place called Host along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. We were going to meet with him. He was a doctor who said he could lead us to Zawahiri. On December 30th, that asset arrived at the base. And just after getting out the car, within 30 feet of our officers, the asset detonated an explosive vest with ball bearings that tore through the compound and through the agents that were there. He was a double agent and had lured our officers into a deadly trap. 7 CIA officers were killed. I met the caskets when they arrived at Dover Air Base. It was a bitterly cold January day, and we stood at attention as the 7 flag-draped coffins were loaded off of a C-17. Those are the kind of people that gave their lives in order to protect this country. And it gave us the inspiration to do everything we could to go after bin Laden. Finally, we got the break that we wanted. The team followed a group of couriers. We found this compound in Abbottabad, a compound that was 8 times larger than anything else in the area, 12-foot high walls, a 7-foot wall on the 3rd floor balcony. Residents who never left, had no telephone, conducted themselves in highly secure ways. A mysterious family living on the 3rd floor. After a great deal of surveillance, we came to the conclusion that there was a strong possibility that bin Laden was there. And I can remember when the president went around the room and asked whether or not we ought to conduct that operation. I said, I have a very simple test, Mr. President, that I've often used in politics, which is to ask the average citizen, if you knew what I do about the intelligence on bin Laden, that this was the best intelligence we had since Tora Bora, what would you do? I think the average American would want us to conduct that operation. And the president, to his credit, said we should. And the mission was a go. And 24 of our best and brightest went into harm's way, 150 miles at night into Pakistan, and conducted that operation with great skill and great determination. And they sent a message to the world that nobody attacks the United States of America and gets away with it. Frankly, after the bin Laden operation, I thought it was time to get the hell out and go back home. But again, the President asked if I would serve as Secretary of Defense. 3 million people, as Chuck knows, 2 million in uniform, a huge bureaucracy, but again, very dedicated people who want to keep America safe. And we were able to accomplish a great deal in ending the war in Iraq, beginning the drawdown in Afghanistan, working with our NATO allies to get rid of Gaddafi. We implemented unprecedented sanctions and pressure on Iran, uniting the world against their nuclear ambitions and making clear that they must not close the Straits of Hormuz and not develop a nuclear weapon. Yes, as Chuck said, I think we clearly should negotiate to determine whether they're serious about dealing with their nuclear capability. But we have to maintain a healthy skepticism. It is the supreme leader that is the key. The supreme leader. And they are not likely to agree to give up enrichment. And so therefore, we must remain strong. We must remain consistent that they must never be able to develop a nuclear weapon, and that we may very well have to use military force to back up our policy. And we worked together to make sure that everyone would have the opportunity to serve in our military. That's what this organization is about, giving everybody the opportunity to serve when they want to. Men, women, regardless of sexual orientation, people who want to serve this country ought to have the opportunity to serve it in uniform, and they do now. And we strengthen our alliance with Israel. And as Chuck said, we continue to support Israel. I made that first trip 20 years ago, an ADL trip. 1991, when hundreds of thousands of Jews from the Soviet Union were making Aliyah and fulfilling a dream to live in a free and more prosperous life in their historic homeland. As director of the CIA and Secretary of Defense, I believe deeply in our obligation to maintain close ties with Israel so that we could confront our common enemies together. Working closely with Mayor Dagan at Mossad and Ehud Barak and others. And over the course of time, we did everything we could to ensure that Israel would have the wherewithal to be able to provide for its security. We have no better friend, no better ally in the world than Israel. My fear today that I will share with you is that I sense that whether it is out of exhaustion of the last 10 years or fear of being embroiled in another conflict, there is a growing mood of isolationism in this country. And the fact is that this remains a very dangerous world. We're fighting a war. We continue to confront terrorism. Yes, we've gone after al-Qaeda's core leadership, but there are now al-Qaeda nodes in Yemen, in Somalia, in Syria, in Mali, throughout North Africa. We continue to have a threat from North Korea as they test ICBM capabilities and nuclear weapons. We have instability and fragility across the Middle East. We have rising powers like China, who pose unique challenges, old powers like Russia that continue to challenge our policies. We are witnessing a whole new battlefront in warfare called cyber, and I do believe that cyber could very well be the Pearl Harbor of the future, so we need to protect ourselves from that as well. And all of this happens at a time when we are imperiled by the gridlock in Washington. This is a time when we must maintain our military strength and our role in the world as a world leader. We cannot retreat from the responsibilities the United States has in the world of today. In fact, I'll tell you something. If you ask me what the biggest threat to our national security is today, it is the fact that our political leaders cannot come together to deal with this nation's problems. This gridlock imperils our national security. Let me tell you, and Chuck knows this firsthand, as a result of sequester, as a result of the shutdown, we are hurting our military readiness in this country. We are making it much more difficult to respond to a major crisis outside of the war zones. The shutdowns and the threats to financially default this country have sent a message of weakness to the world, and it is all avoidable. These are self-inflicted wounds that frankly can be avoided. Avoided if our elected leaders come together, make the compromises necessary to govern the country. In my 50 years of public service, I've seen Washington at its best, and Washington at its worst. But even though I see a Washington that is dysfunctional today, I've also seen it work. Republicans and Democrats coming together to protect our country. And I believe it can happen again. But our leaders have to be willing to take risks. The real strength of America, lies in the American people, lies in those men and women in uniform who are willing to put their lives on the line in order to protect this country. That's where the real strength of America lies. Let me end by telling you the story of one family that took the risk that I just talked about. In January of 2012, in Balan Province, Afghanistan, 3rd Battalion, 1st Special Forces, Sergeant First Class Benjamin Wise, 34, an Army Ranger on his 4th deployment, was struck by enemy fire and he died several days later in Germany. He left behind a wife and 2 sons and a daughter. As was my practice, and it's one of the toughest things we do as Secretary of Defense, is to write a handwritten note to the parents of those who've lost loved ones. But what made this letter different as I was writing it was I realized it was the second time I had written to the Wise family. Ben's brother, Jeremy Wise, was one of the 7 CIA officers who died in the bombing at Host in December of 2009. These are the families that are sacrificing for our country. If they are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, to fight and die in order to protect this country, then surely our political leaders can find a little bit of that courage in order to govern this nation. A few months after I visited the Host base, I remember that on the wall there was a verse from the Old Testament, from the prophet Isaiah. They had it up on a plaque as I went through the base. And the saying is this: "And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?' And then I said, 'Here I am. Send me.'" In Hebrew, as you know, it's hineni. Send me. That is the call of the trumpet. That is the call to service. It is the call, the timeless call, to serve and to sacrifice. And it binds us in a very sacred mission. The ADL has led that mission. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, not just for this award, but for what you do in fighting discrimination, so that an immigrant kid from Monterey could grow up to live the American dream, be Secretary of Defense of the greatest country the world has ever known. Thank you all for what you have done for America and for the world these past 100 years. God bless this country, and God bless all of you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.